From Washington, D.C., I'm Blake Newman.
And I'm Bree Ripley.
And this is the Agile Podcast, where we explore the stories and people behind Agile web solutions.
We've been talking for the last few weeks about Drupal, a content management system that is going through a major change.
Right. Drupal 7 has been around for more than a decade. It's now reaching its end of life, and the move out of Drupal is a big haul because Drupal's core is changing.
And you can find out more about that by listening to previous episodes of the Agile Podcast. But today, we're talking about where to go if you want to move out of Drupal altogether.
To the dark side.
Right, as Blake says, to the dark side, aka WordPress.
Although I guess if you're a WordPress fan, you'd call Drupal the dark side. Anyway, Bree, I want to show you something. I'm sending over a link from the Wayback Machine, which is a web archive. And for those of you listening along, you can find the link in our show notes.
All right.
So tell me what you see.
I see a video still of President Obama. He's at a podium. I see a blue bar up top with several tabs, such as blog, photos and videos. Ooh, a tab for the briefing room. I also see kind of like an RSS feed of top news on the right-hand side below the video tab.
Yeah, so we're basically looking at like a snapshot of whitehouse.gov that's frozen in time. That was basically taken somewhere around 2015. It's relatively nice. It's relatively clean. It's laid out. It's very comprehensive. I mean, there's tons of links. There's tons of different media types, videos and photos and social media and things like that. Scroll down to the very, very bottom.
Oh, wow. A lot of issues. We've got civil rights, defense, disabilities, the economy, education, and so on and so forth. Taxes, technology, women's under issues. And then we've got...
we got women issues.
We got women issues. Then at the very bottom, an option to view the website in Spanish.
So the footer on the bottom of whitehouse.gov back in 2015 is pretty comprehensive. I mean, it's like a site map, and there's just a ton of details, and they go into a ton of explanations about all the different issues that are important at the day. So as it happens, this website, whitehouse.gov from the era of 2015, happens to be powered by Drupal. And when the White House website started using Drupal right around 2008, after 2008, actually, it was a big deal. It's like a big bane for Drupal. The move legitimized Drupal as a content management system that could be used by government agencies. More generally, it led to a wider acceptance of open source software, which is software that is free to use and modify. So now, Bree, I sent you another link. I'd like you to open that one up. This is whitehouse.gov today. So what do you think? What do you see?
I see President Trump pointing at the viewer. I see a very strong header image. That's the thing that captures my eye the most. The tabs are now at the very tippity top of the page rather than a few inches down the screen. And the top tabs seem to be specific to what's going on right now. We've got the economy, national security, budget, immigration, and then a link to an off-site page for coronavirus.gov. Everything looks a lot cleaner today and crisper and more modular. Like I see the searchability feature of this website is featured prominently in the middle of the page. And then there's a bunch of different squares and a really neat Twitter RSS timeline feed.
So when I look at the whitehouse.gov of today, I think that there's less reliance on text and words, and there's more reliance on images. So there's bigger images, bolder images, stronger images, and just a lot less text. And there's also, they're focusing on only a handful of issues. Like there's like 4 or 5 issues, where with the 2015 one, there was like a dozen issues.
Right.
And then when you scroll down to the bottom, I mean, compare the footer of today to the footer of a few years ago. How do you describe the footer now?
Oh my gosh. Night and day difference. It's just so minimal.
Yeah, there's virtually no footer.
Yeah.
So after 2016, in early 2017, Whitehouse.gov migrated to WordPress. The White House said this saved money. And while it's true that WordPress is usually less expensive to maintain than a Drupal site, there was another major change in the White House website when it moved to WordPress. Bree, keeping your comments apolitical, what are the major differences between the pre-2016 and post-2016 versions of whitehouse.gov website?
So pre-2016 is very word-driven, title-driven. There's like a lot of information on this page, a lot of links to go to other websites. It doesn't seem like the goal is to keep people maybe on the page, but to explore all of the nooks and crannies. And then the post-2016 version looks very, it looks extremely dressed up.
I talked to Ashraf Abed about this. He's a big deal in the Drupal community. We will hear more from him in the next episode. But right now, all you need to know is that he led the team that helped migrate whitehouse.gov in Drupal. This is his observations of the before and after 2016 versions of whitehouse.gov.
So I think the two administrations have a very different view on what they hope to get out of the whitehouse.gov platform itself.
The current administration?
They essentially want it to function as a brochure website or a simple blog, whereas the previous administration, they were trying to integrate with a number of external platforms like Flickr and YouTube and etc. So when you look through the back end of the Drupal 6 even and Drupal 7 websites, you would see there is a lot going on.
The current website is, how do you say it, more top-down with their messaging, more strategic, less substance. So WordPress makes sense if your website isn't very functional and more marketing-focused.
And brochure websites are just like they sound, giving out information. Things are relatively static on this site. It functions like a blog and not much else. Not heavy in the details.
And of course, your political leanings probably determine what you think of these websites. But I do think this illustrates the point. If you were to draw a conclusion about the move of whitehouse.gov from Drupal to WordPress, Ashraf says it would be that
Drupal lends itself to ambitious experiences. It naturally is a better fit for more complicated projects with more complicated data models. And based on what the current whitehouse.gov site is, and the fact that it really is a simple blog, I think WordPress is the right choice.
But I also think this move shows something else, that WordPress is gaining in popularity among big government websites. Whitehouse.gov being built in WordPress would have been unthinkable 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah, for a long time, WordPress was seen as the blogging platform. It was for the individual who was posting recipes or travel photos or something, and it was built for the end user.
And I spoke with Peter Slutsky about this. He's the director of business development at Automattic, which is the commercial company behind WordPress. He says that big websites moving to WordPress started in the private sector and is now moving to government entities.
I think when people started to realize at scale and in these venues like the White House and the State Department and other places, that when they started to see WordPress mature as a full-bodied CMS, they started to say, well, why can't we use it?
WordPress has an enterprise-level arm called WordPress Vip.
And when we say enterprise, we're talking big sites like 538 or USA Today or the New York Post. Lots of web traffic.
Right. So over the last decade, WordPress has become a legitimate option for bigger sites that would have historically looked at Drupal for that.
Needless to say, getting the whitehouse.gov site was a big move for WordPress.
And Bree, Peter totally agrees with you about the visual layout of the newest whitehouse.gov site.
I really love the layout. I should say, I think it's a very clean layout. The images seem to have bigger real estate within the confines of the screen that you're on. It's definitely built for the various screen sizes that exist now versus what existed back in 2008.
Peter even compares the new whitehouse.gov site to the Washington Post. It looks like a news site. And Peter's big argument about why WordPress is a better fit is that WordPress has the end user in mind. The interface is simpler than, say, Drupal. But Ashraf says that you can do a lot more with Drupal.
Drupal, you can see, hey, let me create whatever data model makes the most sense, create the relationships and whatnot, and output the data however I like. And now let me, the developer, implement a decent user experience on top of it.
Peter says that is one of the main reasons people end up moving to WordPress.
We do hear this a lot because, again, Drupal is For people out there in your audience who have worked with Drupal, you can, yell at me on Twitter and tell me that I'm wrong.
That's at Slutsky.
My understanding from what we hear, the user experience is more complex, more complicated. It's more of a developer platform. So it's not as intuitive when it comes to both being a creator and being someone that manages content, and then also someone that is kind of a site administrator or someone that is kind of doing the technical aspects of the platform. So I think that the biggest thing that you'll notice coming from Drupal into WordPress is the fact that WordPress is really just built for people to use.
So basically, if you're using Drupal as your CMS, you need someone who knows Drupal well, which could be yourself. WordPress, not so much.
And I'm going to send you over to one more website for you to look at and respond to.
All right. Whoa, this looks like an ancient artifact.
It is.
I love this GIF of the American flag. I love
the
this.
Animated GIF.
This is so good.
So for people listening, this is whitehouse.gov from like the late 1990s. President Bill Clinton and Vice President Al Gore were featured on the website. It's kind of like I guess it's the going away party for Gore and Clinton. It definitely looks like a version 1.0. Definitely looks like, for sure, a way back machine. But remember how we talked about Agile being an iterative process?
Yep, redeveloping your website, whether it be to the next version of Drupal or to WordPress, is an opportunity to change and to improve.
Right. Look at this website from 1999. So much has changed in 20 years. It's gone through multiple iterations and redesigns. But what makes this website different from whitehouse.gov in 2012 or 2018 is just a series of decisions, both big and small. It's really important to use these redesigns and CMS upgrades to think about the future.
If you're moving from Drupal 7 to another CMS, this iteration is a great time to think about what you want. You'll often need to migrate for security, but also to change functionality.
Exactly. Here's Virginia, a project manager at Angelina.
Technology needs to keep updating because people keep finding security breaches. That's one way. Or the other way is just they find better ways to do something than they did before. So technology even just has to follow trends.
And that might mean moving out of Drupal because it no longer suits your needs.
So if your website is more about publishing content and you have like a few people who are going to be in charge of that, then I think WordPress is the way. I think it has a friendlier user interface. So I believe it's easier to manage and maintain as a non-technical person. But if you want something more complex where you have like different types of users with different types of permissions, and you are still going to be creating content and publishing content, but you want a little bit extra, some more complex functionality, then Drupal would be the way.
So if you decide that this iteration of your website will be built on WordPress, there are a few things to keep in mind.
Let's start with a big one: cost.
Oof, yeah. So we already know that Drupal is really complex, and you'll likely have to hire an in-house Drupal developer, or you'll need to contract that work out.
Right. Outsource. You might want to ask yourself and your stakeholders, do you really need the functionality of Drupal? Is it worth the cost? Or are you just building a brochure website that feeds out simple information like blog posts and pictures? You have to know your target audience. Put yourself in their shoes and understand what they need.
But there is also the entrepreneurial mindset of the WordPress community.
Right. Here's Gordon, a Drupal architect at Angelina.
WordPress is hands down much better at monetizing that community, whereas the Drupal community thinks it should just be free.
The Drupal community has a ton of free contributed modules, and that community is working on these modules constantly and identifying security issues. They run things more, should we say altruistically?
WordPress, on the other hand, attracts developers who seem to be a bit more enterprising. Instead of Drupal modules, they're WordPress plugins. And instead of them being mostly community contributed, like what you see in the Drupal community, WordPress plugins often come at a cost because they're considered premium. And in addition to that, they're not always vetted by the community, so there could be security vulnerabilities in those plugins.
And WordPress has long been considered less secure than Drupal because of these plugins. Okay, Blake, so you have to pay for a lot of these plugins and themes, but does that really offset the cost of hiring a dedicated Drupal developer?
Not really. There's probably at least a $100,000 difference between a WordPress site and a Drupal site. You'd have to pay for thousands of premium plugins and modules to spend as much money on a WordPress site as a Drupal site.
Okay, so what about functionality, which I guess is also tied to cost?
I mean, a lot of it's tied to cost.
Everything is tied to cost. Anyway, last week we talked to Nate and Jen Lampton, who developed Backdrop CMS, and they said that the move from D7 to D8 is going to be really expensive.
Yeah, maybe over $1 million if you have a large website. But a big question is, can you get that functionality from something cheaper? Are you really using the complexity of Drupal? For me, I've never built a Drupal website for less than $250,000. And I've never built a WordPress website for more than $250,000.
WordPress is the right choice for people and organizations who simply want to publish marketing content, online journals, and blogs.
Meanwhile, Drupal is a darling among larger organizations who have bigger budgets and want to get more out of their CMS. Organizations like government agencies, universities, nonprofits, and member associations lean towards Drupal. Drupal is becoming more like an enterprise-level CMS, where WordPress continues to serve the masses.
So it's not impossible to build a really complex website in WordPress. That's just not a really strong selling point. And you might want to stick around with Drupal if you're going to do a lot of complex work with your CMS.
So even with WordPress VIP, most of the websites are read-only. They're delivering information in a single direction, high volume, but one-way traffic.
Okay, well, let's say that WordPress is the right choice for me. I use a Drupal 7 site now, so what does that move look like?
Looks like a heck of a lot of work. In a nutshell, the theme or template needs to be rebuilt or recoded. Functionality needs to be rebuilt or reconfigured. And the actual content needs to be migrated, which could be tricky. Finally, there's QA to ensure that all the before and after pages are correct.
Okay, so it's a lot of work to move to WordPress from Drupal. But Drupal migrations from D6 to D7 and D7 to D8 have been historically difficult. Moving forward, future Drupal migrations should be easier, so they say. But do I have to deal with these heavy lifts in future versions of WordPress?
WordPress has been mostly seamless and automatic between major versions for years.
Here's Peter Slutsky again.
WordPress has this kind of just overarching ethos around backwards compatibility. And we have since day one. So there are a lot of people that you talk to out there, especially WordPress enthusiasts, people that have been working with WordPress for a long time, who have essentially, grown up with the platform, and they just, every time a new version comes out, they update, and then they kind of have this site or this platform that has grown over time as the product and the platform matures. Same thing with like plugins and with, generally around the whole ecosystem. Whenever there's a WordPress update, you press update and then things generally just work.
So it's only now that Drupal is catching up to a more effortless upgrade with a move to Symfony. In fact, WordPress has been well ahead of Drupal in other ways, including the drag and drop editor. So anyway, going from Drupal 7 to WordPress should be no harder than going from D7 to D8 or D9. But once you get into WordPress, you basically go into cruise control.
Like a self-driving Tesla. So there's no right answer to what the best CMS is for you. You'll have to decide what types of functionality you'll need, what your budget is, and how much help you're going to get from developers.
It'll probably be cheaper in the long run to move to WordPress, but you might want to stay in Drupal for its features, functionality, and security. Here's John, a Drupal developer at Angelina.
WordPress is terrific. You might be asking why, the difference between Drupal and WordPress. And once again, I would just say, what do you want to do? Who's your target audience? What do you want to accomplish?
But let's just say your site is even simpler and your budget is smaller. I'm going to talk about an even easier option. And if you ask Angelina developer Gordon, most of the time he wouldn't recommend this.
Unless, here's the caveat.
That's Gordon.
There's two truths in life. If you own a truck, all your friends are going to call you when they need to move. If you're a software developer, they're always going to say, you know what, I need a website for my business. Can you help me with that? And the one time that I want to advocate for, not going through the trouble of standing up one of these CMSs, I'd say, yeah, go and use Wix. They already have your theme for you. All you have to do is upload your logo, and you only have 3 pages that will never change.
So if you want a super simple website, you can always move to something like Wix or Squarespace.
In fact, the other day I stumbled upon a Drupal Grandmaster's personal website, which is his online resume featuring all of his Drupal skills, superpowers, and abilities. Bree, guess what he built it in?
Joomla?
No, actually Squarespace.
What?
Yeah, really. Can you believe it? If all you need is to display some pictures, some marketing information, or heck, just a Drupal resume, then maybe you shouldn't even bother with a CMS or a sophisticated one. You can just use an online web management system like Wix or Squarespace.
Okay, so just to recap, if you're basically rebuilding your website from scratch for a move to Drupal 8 anyway, this is a good time to think about maybe making things a bit cheaper.
Right.
And WordPress is simpler and a little bit cheaper. But again, you really have to rebuild like everything.
And get used to a whole new system of classifying things.
And if you want to go even simpler, just get yourself on over to Squarespace or Wix.
Yep, and these aren't the only options. You can do bespoke web design as well.
Basically, a custom CMS built just for your site.
Handmade. Or maybe you don't need a CMS at all. But for the most part, if you're in D7, these are the main places you'll go. 1, Drupal 8 or 9. 2, Backdrop CMS. 3, WordPress. Or 4, moving to something even simpler like Wix or Squarespace.
Or 5, leaving the World Wide Web altogether.
Right, living in a cave with no need for CMS.
But seriously, migrating is, and I really don't mean to belabor this, it's an agile process.
Well, this is the Agile Podcast. So you have to think about what your priorities are.
So you ask yourself questions like, what do I want my site to do?
What's my budget?
What kind of infrastructure do I need or do I have? And will I need to hire in-house developers or contractors?
And next week, we'll start talking about the actual migration. And we'll start with that question. Do I need to hire in-house developers? How do I decide who to hire?
So smash that subscribe button on the Agile Podcast, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And please leave a review while you're at it. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
Talk to you later.
The Agile Podcast is produced by Agilina, a DC-based web development company. To learn more about Agilina, you can visit our website, agilina.com, or send us an email to results@agilina.com. That's AGILEANA.com.